Hello, everybody. Do you hear me? I have this impression that I'm not hearing anything.
Yes, Coloretto.
Okay, so I would say we start now with this panel about regulation and self-regulation. I believe Albania is the right place to launch this kind of discussion, since we've had quite a fight in the last 2 years and almost a half. It was a real fight between a tendency to regulate, a project to regulate, and those who wanted to self-regulate. And the war is not over yet. I mean, we are at an impasse. I hope people who wanted to put forward that regulation project are not going to do it, I hope. But it's not resolved yet. So it's quite a good time to talk about this. I mean, to talk again about this and to see the balances between the two. Although some of us know perfectly what it is. But it's good to see some fresh perspectives. And I believe we already have in this panel some people that I'm looking forward to hear from. I would like to start this panel with a new initiative. It's called the European Digital Media Observatory. I believe it's a very important one and very interesting one because it's dealing with what is the major problem that we all have with the media today, which is disinformation. So I would like to invite to take the floor our first guest speaker.
Hello, can you hear me?
I'm
Very well. I will quickly share my slides if you hear me. All right, so as it was mentioned, the European Digital Media Observatory is a new project that is promoted and funded by the European Commission. I will very, very briefly tell you a little bit more about EDMO and then move to the topic of the discussion, which is self-regulation and co-regulation, and in this case, given the focus of EDMO, focusing on online disinformation. So EDMO is a consortium that is based at the European University Institute at the School of Transnational Governance, and also works with the Center for Media Pluralism and Media Freedom that is based at the UI as well. Aarhus University, Athens Technology Center, and Pagella Politica, which is a fact checker in Italy, are also members of this consortium. Let's say the added value of EDMO is that we are an independent infrastructure. So the overall aim of EDMO is to act as a platform, as a community builder, if you want. And on one side, we aim to gather stakeholders from the various sectors dealing with tackling online disinformation. On the other side, our aim is to basically collect evidence, data, numbers, information, papers, whatever can be used actually to fight disinformation online. And the idea is really to do that in order then for the stakeholders to use what EDMO is gathering and to, let's say, trigger dialogues in this with this final aim. You might probably also know that there were calls for national and multinational hubs in Europe, and this will be actually our hands in the various member states that will help us in doing our work. Very briefly, really briefly, we have 5 main pillars. The first one is that we are setting a secure online platform for fact checkers who have a focus in the EU. And those fact checkers basically can do joint investigations, they can share best practices and so on. And we also have an automatic translation tool within the platform, so that the language barrier should actually be lowered. Same for researchers. We have a governance body that is managing EDMO, and which has the very delicate task of establishing a framework to provide access to the data of the online platforms for research purposes. And then we have repository and mapping exercises. So we are mapping the fact-checking activities in Europe. We are building repositories of policy papers, of academic papers. As mentioned before, we are aiming at collecting information that is useful in the fight against online disinformation. And we also provide policy analysis and try to provide support to the European Commission, to the regulatory authorities. You might have heard a lot about EDMO. We are kind of mentioned often. We will see what will happen also with the next steps of the Commission in this field. So far, this is our mission. So now I wanted to move to the topic of co-regulation and self-regulation. And I mean, we all know that when we have to tackle this information, it's a balancing exercise. On one side, we would like to we have to guarantee the right to make informed decisions in a democratic process, which of course starts with elections. But if we think also about the COVID-19 situation right now, it's also about, for example, the security and health of people. On the other side, we have to respect fundamental rights, such as freedom of expression and information. And of course, we have to avoid a ministry of truth. This all is done in a very, very fast evolving scenario. We have the technology that is advancing. This means that also the tools and the actors are changing, and also the disinformation strategies. So to have a policy response for that means on one side having this balance, and on the other side being able to act quickly, or at least to act with a policy that is applicable in the long term. So you might know that the first step towards that was the Code of Practice on Disinformation. This is a self-regulatory tool, and it was, if you want, the natural first step. This was done in 2018, following also the action plan of the Commission and the report of the high-level group. This is a self-regulatory tool, but self-regulation in Europe is quite different compared also to other places. If you think about it, it is self-regulation, but if you have a look at the definition that is given also in the regulatory toolbox, I mean, let me read you the definition. It's where business or industry sectors formulates code of conduct or operating constraints on their own initiative for which they are responsible for enforcing. So this is the self part. However, pure self-regulation is uncommon at the EU level. It generally involves the Commission in instigating or facilitating the drawing up of the voluntary agreement. And this is what's happened also in this case. The signatories of the code are, let's say, the main online platforms. Let's say the signatory process is open anytime. For example, I don't know, TikTok is one of the recent signatories, but it's not only open to the online platforms. Think also about, for example, the advertising sector, which is actually key. And hopefully there are already signatories from that sector. Hopefully there will be more. To go back to what we were saying, where the Commission still has a role, there is a yearly reporting exercise to be done to the Commission on how the code is applied and implemented. And let me also say that we all know that in this sector, actually not only in this sector, but definitions are key. And for the code, and actually for the whole approach of EDMO, what is used is the definition that is given that is also adopted by the Commission, that was also given in the high-level group report, which is this information includes all form of false, inaccurate, or misleading information designed, presented, and promoted to intentionally cause public harm or for profit. So there is the intention to cause harm, while misinformation is exactly when you don't have the intention to cause harm. I will very briefly go through that. The code is based on 5 main pillars that go through 15 commitments. One is a scrutiny of advertisement placement. The other is political advertising and issue-based advertising. We have the integrity of services, empowering consumer services, and empowering the research community. In 2020, there were, even before, a lot of assessments of this code were issued, and the final one was the one of the Commission. And there was acknowledgement of the fact that the code was indeed a good first step, but there was also acknowledgement about the fact that there were a number of limits. So on the positive side, it was acknowledged that it was starting reducing opportunities for advertising payments and economic incentives for the actors that disseminate this information online. As you know, there are cases in which like political, let's say, disinformation actually is only based on the fact that it is a clickbait for possibility in actually to gain more money from advertising. It is enhancing transparency of political advertising, though more can be done. It is taking action against and disclosing information about malicious actors that use basically manipulative technique of the platform services. It is starting setting up technological features that give prominence to trustworthy information, though there again, every platform has a different approach, and it's starting actually the collaboration, which is key here. Collaboration between the various actors, fact checkers, research community, media literacy initiatives, platforms, regulators is key. However, one of the main limits is that it is lacking commonly shared definitions and procedures, which means that basically the risk is that the focus of the platforms is different. Another very important element is that KPIs are missing, and by consequence also an appropriate monitoring exercise. All relevant stakeholders should be included. As I was saying, the advertising sector is there, but not as much as it should be. The lack of access to data. This is actually very, very important. As I was mentioning, EDMO is working a lot on that. And having access to those data means actually being in a possibility to understand really the trends and the threats that are posed by online disinformation. And thus, as a consequence, to be able to actually elaborate evidence-based policies. Let me also say that the data that we're giving by the platforms, the information, let's say, given by the platform in their reporting, it's not that much, but when it is given, it is actually at the aggregated level, so at EU level and not at member state level, which actually makes a lot of difference. It is difficult to assess the timeliness and impact of the actions they are doing, the platforms are doing, and that means that while we started with collaboration, I mean, we need a more structured model for cooperation between the platforms and the research community. So, as I already mentioned a few things, I mean, the main element that we're missing, but just for you to mention, to have more examples. For example, the current definition of manipulative online behavior basically is the misuse of automated bots. But I mean, this is something that started years ago and it changed, and these techniques are changing again. So we need a definition that is actually able to kind of change together with the tools. There is no definition on micro-targeting of political advertising. Luckily, the European Democracy Action Plan will work on that. We need more fairness in political advertising and tools. This will come. And as I was mentioning, the KPIs. These are just examples, of course. So I'm sorry, the slides look complicated, but actually it's less than what it looks like. So the next step, so we had this first self-regulatory tool, and we realized it was a good first step, but it was not sufficient. So while keeping the principles of accountability and transparency in protecting democracy and human rights, the European Commission has, let's say, prepared this set, which is the Commission published the European Democracy Action Plan, where it still refers, of course, to the code of practice, and where it is said that it will actually issue guidance that are needed, that act actually as guidance for the signatories of the practice to strengthen that code. Then the Commission published a proposal for the Digital Service Act. This is a regulation, which means that it would apply to all member states, directly to all member states. So it's not like a directive that you need to then implement, and which actually has an impact on the harmonization at the EU level. The European Democracy Action Plan has three main pillars: promote free and fair elections and strong participation in the democratic process, support free and independent media, and counter disinformation. Overall, the idea, as you can understand, is to build resilience in society. The Commission in these months, actually, and EDMO was involved in that, started talking to stakeholders. It did a multi-stakeholders dialogue exercise to gather feedback to publish this guidance, which should be published actually in a few months. And according to that, the platforms will actually strengthen their code of practice. Then this is kind of acting as a bridge to when we will have the DSA in place. I mean, this is a proposal. This means that actually we will need to wait at least 2 years until this gets adopted, and the text might actually change a lot. Some of the main principles is that the non-liability principle stays, the non-liability principle of the platform, which means that they are not responsible for the content. They are, let's say, that goes through the platform, besides in case they actually are aware about the fact that they are carrying content which is illegal. And we will go back now later on with the next slides on the illegal point. Plus there is, as you can see, this distinction between very large, intermediary services, then hosting services, online services, and very large platforms. So there are rules that apply to all the intermediary services, and then specific rules only when you also are hosting service, online service, and very large platform. So the Digital Services Act is mainly focusing on illegal content, and we know that disinformation is not considered illegal content. But there are still, let's say, elements that bring the debate towards the co-regulation and that focus on disinformation. The first is that according to the current text of the DSA, fixing platforms' vulnerability against their manipulation. I mean, there is an article saying that, I mean, in case the platforms experience that there is manipulation of the platform actually to amplify harmful behaviors such as, and here comes disinformation, the spread of political disinformation, hoaxes, and manipulations during pandemics, harms, to attack basically vulnerable groups. In this case, actually, there is a risk-based approach where platforms, actually very large platforms, so the smaller, let's say, focus I was showing to you, they have to assess and mitigate the risk. And they will also have to go through an independent audit. The other thing is that there are rules on transparency of the content moderation decision. So it means like if, for example, the platform deletes a content because it is going against their policies, they should actually explain why, and there will be auditing reports and independent research on that. It is also empowering the users in understanding and making informed decisions about the advertisement they see, and this is very important. Users will need to be informed of whether they are targeted by an advertising, who is paying for that. They should really understand when content is sponsored or when it is organically posted on the platform. And in case of very large platform, they also have to have a
Dear
repository.
Paola, I must remind you that you have only 2 or 3 minutes to wrap up because we are running out of time. I know it's very interesting. It's very interesting, but we need to wrap this part. Thanks.
All right, no problem. So let me just say that what is kept is the code of conduct for the very large online platforms. And here the codes will actually probably also be kind of taking into consideration the strengthened code of practice that will be published in the meantime. Again, the element for that is the manipulation of the service of the platform. So very briefly, as I was saying, multi-stakeholder approach, there will be a new strengthened code, and then we will move towards co-regulation. And I will not go too much into details of that. This, I can send you the slide later on. These are the main element of strengthening the code. Let me just, because I think it's very important, underline the importance of having common definitions, of having a good research that can actually act as a tool for evidence-based policies, which means really the need to understand all the various elements of the disinformation chain. Overall, the idea is to build resilience, and building resilience does mean that it's not only about regulation and co-regulation, it's also about quality of journalism, quality of the media, media literacy, and so on. So I'm done. Sorry for being too long.
No problem. Thank you very much, Paola. Thank you very much. It's very important what you said. Do you hear me? Hello.
Coloretto.
Yes, I had this. Sorry, I had this brief moment of disconnection, I believe. It was very important what Paula was saying. It's a tricky balance. We have business on one side and information for the public on one side, and advertisement as well. So we need to keep balance between all those, as well a balance between freedom of speech and the need to self-regulate and to give the opportunity to public to make informed choices. But the problem of the business is growing quite big, as are the big platforms. We are seeing in the recent years that the big platforms are
Sorry, Mr. Popretevsky, can you start with your presentation? Because it's your floor now. Do you hear me, Mr. Popretevsky?
Yes. I was trying to unmute. Yes, I hope you're hearing me now.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning from Skopje. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before this forum. My name is Vasko Popetevsky. I'm editor-in-chief of the TV show 360 Degrees that is airing on TV Alsat, national commercial broadcaster in North Macedonia, and editor of the online news portal 360 at stepeni.mk. Today, I will talk about the business aspect of the topic we are discussing, advertising and its importance. It will be a micro perspective compared to the intervention of the previous keynote speaker, but I hope still interesting for all of you. Let me first state my main thesis, and it is that there is no effective and functional self-regulation without direct involvement of the business sector and potential advertisers in the process. In North Macedonia, we have Council of Media Ethics from 2014. Marina Tuneva, the chairman of the council, is here with us today, and she will hopefully be part of the discussion later. In the frame of the Council of Media Ethics, we have quite active press compliance commission. But my point is that all efforts for self-regulation within the media community would be fruitless if companies are advertised in media that do not comply with professional and ethical standards. Let me give you a broader perspective. As you may know, North Macedonia went through a dramatic period of decline of democracy at the time Nikola Gruevski was in power from 2006 to 2016. Most media, both traditional and new, were controlled by the then ruling party, VMRO-DPMNE. Their reporting was full of unprofessionalism and violation of basic principles of the journalists' code of ethics, but it did not affect their advertising revenue. On the contrary, those were their most profitable years. Not a single company declared that they refused to advertise in a certain media because of its unprofessionalism. It is true that the reason can be traced to the fact that North Macedonia at the time was a capture state, a term that the European Commission used to describe the situation in the country in one of its reports at the time. But the fact is that from today's perspective, the business community has significantly contributed to the establishment and maintenance of that state capture, precisely through the funding of non-professional and propaganda media. Has anything changed with the change of the government in 2017 and the beginning of the, let's say, slow re-democratization of the country? In 2019, the largest association of journalists in Macedonia and the Council of Media Ethics, a self-regulatory body of the media in the country, started a project to create a register of professional online media. As part of the initiative, they signed a memorandum of cooperation with the largest chamber of commerce in the country. In the absence of even basic regulation of online media, the aim was, as was stated, to make it easier for the business community to identify which media meet the criteria to be media, respect the journalistic code, and have transparent ownership and impressum. Or, as the president of the Association of Journalists said on that occasion, companies will know where to advertise or where not to. The registry was set up. It is available online, but unfortunately, its effect in practice, in my opinion, is zero. This is why. In order to prepare for my contribution at this conference, as I already briefly said yesterday, I visited the online portal of a self-proclaimed journalist whose articles, if we can name it articles, do not respect any professional or ethical standards. The portal is not part of the register of professional online media, but is flooded with advertisements. Many of them are from companies that are members of the largest chamber of commerce, which, as I have already said, signed a memorandum of cooperation with the Association of Journalists and Council of Media Ethics. So it turns out that the chamber's commitment to encourage advertising only among the members of the registry was only rhetorical. As I already said in my brief intervention yesterday, if you are interested in the reasons, apart from possible blackmailing and racketeering for such a large number of advertisements on this portal, I would say it is also its closeness to the current ruling party of the Prime Minister Zoran Zaev and the open defense of its policies. I would like also to share my personal experience from the contacts with marketing agencies and advertisers from the position of the head of an online portal that has an average of 1 million sessions and 1.5 million page views per month in a country of not more than 2 million residents. Nobody ever mentioned the register of professional media to me. On the contrary, my conclusion from those contacts is that the quality of the portal means nothing. Advertisers and marketing agencies are only interested in bare numbers of visits and clicks. Some advertisers condition advertising with publishing of so-called PR texts that, of course, have nothing to do with professional journalism. Others try to use the advertising on the sites to directly influence their editorial policy and independence. Therefore, I think that the business community needs to be included in a much more direct way in the efforts to establish effective and functional self-regulation. Is advertising in professional online media just a corporate social responsibility of the companies? I think no. I think that business should be interested in strong professional media because they are allies in pointing out inconsistencies and abuses of politics and institutions. Businesses should have an interest in legal certainty, the rule of law, independent judiciary, efficient public administration, non-corrupt civil servants and officials. And that is simply not possible without professional media. Thank you. Coloreto?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having some connectivity problems, it seems. Vasco, thank you very much for your intervention. I believe it's very important what you said, that a strong democracy and the business and the possibility to do business in a healthy environment is very important to the businesses. And I believe it's the way to create such environment is a strong media and an ethical media. So thank you very much for bringing this idea out. We just need to let's say, to find the means to make the business understand this feature. I would like to invite now our colleague from Tirana, from Björn Besar Likmeta. Björn is a well-respected organization, not here, but in the region and more. And the reason is that they apply high standards of ethics. So I'm inviting Besar to share with us their internal high standards in place. Besar, the floor is yours. If you can please keep it short to 7 to 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Coloreto. I think this is a really important discussions, and the interventions made by the previous speakers were really interesting to follow. When we think about digital media ethics and ethical standards, I think we have to have an understanding of, and it was touched a little bit, what digital media is. I mean, in Albania, we have, the last 2 years, we've been discussing a lot about media regulation because of the government push to regulate digital media through an administrative body. This was vehemently opposed by the local media associations, the community of journalists, but also we found support in our struggle in the larger community of international media organizations, the European Commission, the Council of Europe, and also the Venice Commission, which issued a damaging report, a damaging opinion of the, let's say, the legislation that was proposed by the government. So what is digital media? We have several things that we look at when we describe digital media. We have legacy media outlets like newspapers and the TV channels, but which now broadcast in numeric and also operate through online and social networks. We have non-native digital media. We have the likes of the New York Times and the CNNs and the Daily Mails and the Russia Todays, which still influence local audiences. We have native digital media outlets, which are specific of the country. In Albania, we have a few popular ones, which have become part of the public debate. They can influence public debate, websites that sprang out in the last few years. And now they're multiplying. And this is one of the reasons why the government pushed to regulate online media outlets through an administrative body, because one of their arguments was that these native digital media outlets were having a greater influence on the audiences, so they wanted some sort of control in terms of slander and fake news. And also we have social networks like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. What do you call them? Do you call them media outlets, or do you call them distribution networks? I mean, the debate may still be out, but one thing is for certain. Facebook is probably, in terms of revenues, the biggest media outlet in Albania, and not only in Albania. I mean, I'm sure in every country, because most of the advertising that was flowing to all the legacy digital, and native digital media outlets in the beginning of the online era, most of it is going to Facebook ads right now, or Google ads, or YouTube ads. So how this, let's say, digital environment affects the discussion about media independence and self-regulation. The thing about the discussion that we had in the last 2 years regarding digital media in Albania and regulation, particularly for non-native digital media, one of the main arguments that the government pushed is that the digital media is not regulated, but broadcast, for example, is. So we cannot have, let's say, some of these hundreds of websites running free and pushing misinformation and disinformation and things like that. But I think this kind of argument is it's not honest and it's not true in a sense. I mean, there is regulations which touch the digital media, the native digital media in Albania. I mean, speech which is, I mean, the main bread and butter of media outlets, even digital ones, is regulated by certain, not only, let's say, laws and regulations, but also codes of conduct, which is the criminal code or the civil code. So, for example, digital media outlets in Albania don't have the right to incite violence and social hatred because you can be criminally prosecuted. You don't have the right to spread hate speech because you can, let's say, be fined penally by the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner. You don't have the right to libel and defame individuals, entities, although the government claimed that we did, because then you can be criminally prosecuted and fined quite stiffly in a court of law, but also you can be, let's say, civilly brought to court for damages by an entity or the individual. Also, there is regulations in terms of privacy by the data commissioners and copyright. I mean, how many times have we discussed cases when Albanian outlets, let's say, social media pages were reported for having copyright infringements, and sometimes that also was abused by companies to kind of like censor certain types of speech. So there is regulation in Albania, and there are regulators. There is the courts, there is the, let's say, the commissioners in terms of anti-discrimination, data privacy. There is the transposition of the General Data Protection Regulation, which is happening. The EU regulation is being transitioned into local legislation. There is data access regulation, but also there is regulation in terms of competition. So to think about this online environment as the Wild West, which is totally unregulated by any law, it's an honest discussion, I think. I don't think it tells you the whole picture. But still, we should be clear that despite the layers of regulation, the online world of environment of native digital media publication still has a lot of problems in terms of ethics. And we've seen fake news, disinformation, misinformation, propaganda. There is a lot of websites which are guns for hire. So certainly there is issues that could be, in a sense, either regulated or self-regulated in the discussion that we have according to this. Through these two alternatives to arrive to a more ethical and media environment, a more, let's say, independent media environment. If we think about the role that, let's say, regulation could have, there's been a lot of debate in Albania about pushing, let's say, regulation through an administrative body. You know the many ills that comes through it or the risks that come through it. I mean, on top of these layers of regulation that we already have, which I already mentioned, if you put, let's say, another layer of regulation through an administrative body, which is, as the Venice Commission said, neither independent nor professional, which is through the proposed like the Complaints Council in the Audiovisual Media Authority, the problem would be the risk of greater censorship, of self-censorship of local media outlets, which is a problem that we already face and is widespread. So most of us agree, I think, that self-regulation is the way to move forward in terms of improving the quality of media in Albania. But I think we should have a discussion, how do we approach self-regulation, because there is two forms of it, I believe. Internal self-regulation, which happens inside media outlets, and the level of editorial guidelines, editorial control, capacities, training of journalists to recognize, let's say, misinformation or fake news, and fact checking. And there is external self-regulations, and there is really good initiatives that have been sprang out in Albania in recent years, like the Media Council or the ethical media alliances, which are trying to push self-regulation post factum through, let's say, a network of media outlets agreeing to apply common ethical rules. I believe since we're moving in the right direction in terms of external self-regulation, I believe that more should be done in terms of internal self-regulation inside media outlets. What we've noticed in recent years, it's that editorial capacities in the Albanian media outlets are really weak. They're weak because the owners are investing very little into, let's say, professional editors, in the number of editors, and let's say to have proper guidelines to be followed, which are transparent. As far as I know, only a handful of media outlets from this, like hundreds of them in Albania, Boeing broadcaster, newspapers, or digital native media outlets have written editorial guidelines. Even the public service media only got them a few years, 3-4 years ago, through the support of the OSCE. And the editorial capacities of the media outlets, most of the time, are there only to, let's say, to guarantee the editorial line, which is pushed by the owner, in a sense, the editorial alignment of the media outlet, but not the editorial contours in terms of the quality of respecting the ethical code, of checking information, fact-checking information. And this becomes a problem, because in the moment that you have external self-regulation and you're imposing on journalists, let's say, some sort of control and saying that, like, post-factum mistakes can be made and you have to address them, but you don't have a proper environment to support, let's say, the journalist capacities to actually control the information they're getting, the amount of time they have to report the news, the editorial lineup to support proper ethical decisions, and the lack of journalistic training. I don't think that just having a post-factum control through an external self-regulation can be successful. So I think we should be investing more into editorial capacities inside the media outlets, and there should be more training, but training that not only is given by civil society organizations, but also something that is required and is expected of media owners to strengthen their capacities. Understandably, I believe that this lack of training and deterioration of editorial capacity has come because of the lack of competition in the media market. But I think that the time has come to, in a sense, to invest more in the capacities and the role of media to serve the public interest in general and protect let's say, the audiences and the readers from misinformation campaigns, which we have learned in this particular moment of the COVID pandemic can be really dangerous. Thanking you all for your attention. I'll just pass my my time to Coloretto, and I hope I have been as brief as he requested.
Besar, thank you very much. You were, I mean, brief enough, but enough to give an expose of the situation the journalists are working today, especially in Albania and in the Balkans, because we share same problems. It's very important what you said, that big and professional media can build their own internal structure of self-regulation. We see it with the big media in the world. We see it with, let's say, serious and professional media, even in the Balkans. Brno is one of them. But since, as you said, since most of the small media, let's say, don't have the means to create such structures, then we need to create these external self-regulating mechanisms. So thank you for pointing it out. Yet we are facing a situation in the Balkans where the code of ethics is most of the times being ignored, even by those who are journalists, Besar with 20, 30, or even more years of experience. And why is that? We have prepared a poll for this, which will be launching in your screens in a few seconds. It's a poll through which we would like to understand why the existing methods, the existing ethic codes are not being implemented. Is it because of the competition? Is it because of the lack of tradition? Or is it because, especially in this area of ours, the ethic codes are copy-pasted from Western models? So I'm gonna fill my, or maybe there are other issues. So you choose one, and we'll see what you as professionals especially in Albania and in the Balkans, because we share same same problems. It's very important to say that a big and professional can build their own internal structure of self-regulation.
Hi, everybody. Just to make sure everyone can hear me. Ola has asked me just to step in while Coloretto is sorting out his internet issues. Just 1 second while I... can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so hold on 1 second. So thank you, Beza, for your contribution. I'm going to move on now. Hold on a second. They want me to see the poll response. I don't have access to the poll, unfortunately. 1 second. Sorry, this is okay. Right, here we go. So the answers of the poll were: the majority of you think that the issue regarding why existing ethic codes are not being implemented is the fact that there is a lack of tradition. 53% of you said you thought that that was the leading issue that we have. 26% said other. So I guess later perhaps we can find out what some of those other suggestions might be, other issues might be. Next was competition with 16%. So 16% you thought lack of competition in the media sort of environment was causing this situation. And 5%, just 5% thought that ethics codes are copy pasted from Western models, and therefore there might be some issues in sort of applying them within our local and very unique environments. So those were the results of the poll. 1 second, is Coloretto back with us, or shall I continue to the next? Okay, so next up we have Urim Bayrami. Okay, sorry, I'm ad-libbing here and this is terrible. So we have Violetta Husini Kalmendi, who is from the Kosovo Independent Media Commission. And she's going to be speaking. Violetta, are you here? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Sorry for my terrible introduction there.
Not at all. Okay, I hope you can hear me well. It looks like we're having some internet connection problems. Okay, let me represent myself. I'm Violetta Husseini Kelmendi, and I'm here as representative of the Independent Media Commission, which is the regulatory body for audio and audiovisual media in Kosovo. I have to say that thank you for having me, first of all, in this panel. I'm happy to meet a lot of people from the same, with whom we share the same background and profession. And I'm very happy to hear a lot of perspectives from different, from colleagues from different countries in the region. I have to say that as a former journalist, I am deeply convinced that regulation of the media by state should be very limited. And it should be mainly to registration, licensing, ownership, and preventing concentration of media. So to give media space to have competition. While the true ethics standards can be created only by independent media. So media should be able to work in a free environment, and they should be responsible for self-regulation with internal and external mechanisms. The Independent Media Commission in Kosovo is the body responsible for regulation, management, and oversight of the broadcasting frequency spectrum in the Republic of Kosovo. So our regulation in principle guarantees the fair and transparent administration of media business, but we still have a lot of challenges regarding media ownership, which continues to remain an area subject to vague disclosure of information. And this is in particular case with online media in Kosovo, which are self-regulated through the Press Council of Kosovo. Our legal interference is paved with goodwill and prompted by the public's real need for standards of journalism. The ultimate goal of IMC is to enhance ethics and quality, or to balance other important values like state security, social peace, or individual or personal rights. And we are fully aware that ethical journalism can only develop in an atmosphere of guaranteed freedom, and we try to impose minimum sanctions, I have to say. Mainly our sanctions are based on complaints that citizens make regarding the media content. So for the break of, mainly for the break of the code of ethics. And so namely when media really fail to carry out their legal responsibilities. So we do receive complaints, let's say, for the break of personal rights of people whose personal data have been revealed, let's say, in a TV program, and mainly in televisions. As in radio, we see less of these kind of breaks, but mainly on televisions. But sometimes we receive complaints as well for not giving the right to get their opinion. So the news is not balanced. When it comes to the self-regulation in Kosovo, as I mentioned before, this is a responsibility of the Press Council of Kosovo, who was established 15 years ago with the support of the OSCE in Kosovo. And I have to say that the Press Council of Kosovo functions quite well and grounds its work on the experience, approach, and procedures of some other European press councils. In Kosovo, the Press Council, the self-regulatory body, is considered as one of the key players for the print and online media sector in Kosovo, which contributes to the creation of a free, independent, professional, and unbiased media sector. However, the number of the media who are members and who obey to the rules and guidelines of the Press Council of Kosovo are limited, considering the big number of online media that we have in Kosovo. The Press Council in Kosovo provides a mechanism for anyone to seek a remedy, including the right of reply, correction, or apologize. And the law against defamation and insult in Kosovo as well recognize Press Council as one of the bodies where an affected party may seek redress in the first instance. However, both regulatory and self-regulatory bodies in Kosovo face a lot of challenges. And there is a lack of formal and informal communication between media on one side and regulators and self-regulators on the other side. And I think with improvement of this communication, being that workshops or even trainings on different regulations and guidelines would contribute to better understanding of rights and responsibilities of both sides, and it would improve the quality of journalism in Kosovo. So when it comes to the challenges that we as a regulator are facing, one of the key challenges as well, the legal reforms. Our law is outdated if we see it from the perspective of the new EU directive on audiovisual media services, which gives as well regulators more responsibility over video sharing platforms. And the IMC law should be renewed, but we have quite a lot of political challenges in Kosovo. We do not have a stable government nor assembly, and therefore it's quite difficult to push forward with the legal reforms. And another big challenge and a very important issue for us is to address the financial independence of our institution. For your information, we depend on the Kosovo budget. We are the only regulator that are fully dependent from the budget of the state. So without, it goes without saying that as long as you do not become financially independent, you are not able to become politically independent as well. And I mean, considering that this is a big issue, I think that, of course, it affects a lot. I mean, the way how the members of the Independent Media Commission are being selected. So the Parliament of Kosovo, in our case, should take, I mean, very seriously the need to make these legal reforms, and as well how it selects the members of the IMC who should have a professional and ethical competencies to perform this function, as the duty is extremely sensitive and extremely important. Of course, we have another challenge because some members of the commission, so the decision-making body, have only 2-year mandate, and they need at least 1 year to get acquainted with the way how the institution works. So it's almost impossible to make substantial change within 2 years of the mandate. So when it comes to the Press Council, the challenges that the self-regulatory body is facing in Kosovo, I think it should have a greater support from the community of journalists. And I would really like to see journalists and media in Kosovo being more organized and defending, I mean, their standard of ethics. So the Press Council of Kosovo as well should get more support from international donors who need to support this body financially and professionally. And as well, the Press Council should have more support from the general public, who should be eager, you know, to have right information and accurate and balanced information. And here comes a lot the role that media literacy has to play. And the Press Council as well of Kosovo should fight more effectively as well to convince the public that the media are conscious of the need for standards, to name and to shame corruption in the media, and to offer complaint resolution in justified cases. And last but not least, it should work more to increase its presence and its visibility in the public so that citizens are able to better understand its role and contribute to qualitative journalism. Because I'm very sure that a lot of people in Kosovo do not know about the Press Council of Kosovo, and they do not know even for the regulatory body, which is Independent Media Commission in Kosovo. So we have a lot to do to address all these challenges that we have ahead of us. Thank you very much. If you have any question, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Violeta, for the expose of the situation in Kosovo. From my own experience, I believe the Kosovo self-regulation body is working quite well. And I'm really very happy for that, because we need some positive positive examples. And I believe one of the reasons why it is working good, it is because too much of European spirit into it. I mean, since the creation, inspiration and the foundation of it. Thank you very much. I would like to invite our next speaker. She also comes from a successful experience with a media council. She comes from the Republic of North Macedonia, Marina Tuneva, and is the director of the Macedonian self-regulatory body. And they are one of the examples we are looking from Albania. We are looking towards to get inspired and to follow. So please, if you can share your experience with us and how you managed to make it in a few years, because you were created like 3 or 4 years ago, I suppose. How did you make it to be, I mean, so inclusive with so many members and so functional? Marina, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Coloretto. Thank you all for this opportunity to be together and discuss the topic of media self-regulation and how it develops in our specific contexts. Actually, the Press Council in North Macedonia, the Council of Media Ethics, is active for 5th year already. And it's, I must say, and I must say it honestly, that it hasn't been an easy game to do it, to succeed in a context of this kind. I would agree with my colleague Vasko Popetreski, who explained the circumstances in which media work and the way investments, the so-called investments by the state in certain media in the past have affected the media and their professionalism. In such a context, it's not easy to work on media self-regulation. One of the main messages that we understood as part of this process of establishing and promoting self-regulation in the country is that we need to work and network with different stakeholders and actors in the society. Therefore, knowing that we have problems in the internet field with the online media, we realize that it's very much needed to address the right stakeholders. And in this direction, we established the Registry of Professional Online Media. We try to involve the business community as one of the important, very important actors in the process. And I would agree with Vasko's statement at the very beginning when he said that without the business community, it's impossible to have entirely professional online media, because the business community is very much needed in the process. It was a long process to establish the Registry of Professional Online Media, which is now joined by more than 135 media, and the interest to join it is continuous. One of the main objectives to establish the registry was to try to make a distinction between credible and non-credible media, in my opinion, this is very, very important, because we know that regardless of the efforts that has been done so far, we still have unprofessional so-called media or platforms that are misused to share disinformation, to create disinformation, which serve propaganda purposes, etc., etc. I'm afraid, I must say, that it wouldn't be possible to hope for a total removal, or how to say it, of this kind of media from the media scene, not only in our country, but in general. But what is possible, in my opinion, is to make this distinction, who is credible and who is not. And I think that this was one of the things that we managed to accomplish to a certain extent so far. Because those that are in the registry agreed to observe the standards and the criteria for acceptance in the registry, which are, amongst other, having a clear ownership structure, then signing of the articles that they have, observance of the professional framework or ethical professional framework that we have, etc., etc. We have a mechanism to remove certain media from this registry if they do not observe the professional criteria. For instance, if there are 3 adjudications of the Press Complaints Commission, which is an independent body in the Press Council, if we have them 3 times in a row in the last 3 months, then they actually meet the criteria to be out of the registry. But our intention is not to, play this role of punishing the media. Our intention is to motivate the media as such, the online, as the other types of media too, to observe the professional standards, to work professionally, which is needed. And in this regard, I agree with what Besar said, that it's needed to work on internal mechanisms of self-regulation of media too. We are not the ones that could impose a full observance of professional standards. Others can do it. Others, such as media, the professional media community is important here, judiciary is important, the regulator is important too. So it's business community, as we said, it's several stakeholders that are needed. In our specific context, this is what is needed. We've been in a continuous communication with the press councils across Europe, and we know what the climate is there. It's easy to work on self-regulation there, because they do not need different stakeholders in the society to convey the message that media should be professional, to convey the message that the problems and phenomena which are to be punished should be punished. Because if something is an issue, for instance, if the crime code is violated by using online media to publish contents that has hate speech, then it's really a problem and it should be punished. The law should be observed. We have a long history of non-implementation of the law by different institutions. We have sufficient legal framework that covers the work of the online media. So we don't, we do not have a position that additional regulation is needed. The internet is the only space whose freedom of expression should be supported entirely. And we shouldn't impose legal provision, more legal provisions other than the ones that we already have. But the history of non-punishing or non-functionality of the state institutions and institutions of the system has affected the way this problem is perceived, or the way it's addressed in general. So the registry is done, as I said, with the chamber, with the economic chamber in the country. We've been quite vocal about their important role in the process, that they shouldn't advertise, and that the economic chamber is the one to convey the message to the business community. It's their responsibility to ask for the companies to not advertise. But as we mentioned and Vasco mentioned before, we still have media, unprofessional ones, or online media platforms that are not professional, and where companies still advertise. And it's really a big problem, in my opinion. We started discussing this issue with the Economic Chamber. We do not want to neglect the importance of this initiative of establishing the registry and its main purpose by the non-activity of the other actors. So we are in a discussion with the Chamber about the way they would continue approaching this issue as one of the relevant stakeholders. But as I said, there are other important stakeholders too, such as the Judiciary, the Public Prosecutor's Office, the Ministry of Interior, the Commission for Prevention of Discrimination, which luckily has a new composition now, and we expect it to be more active when it comes to discrimination and hate speech in the media, etc., etc. We also started a kind of a partnership with the Association for Digital Marketing in the country, which is also a responsible actor, and it has its own competencies when it comes to promoting professionalism among the online media. We continue working on initiatives as part of the network on addressing hate speech in the media. There are many stakeholders join this initiative too, but we want to see them active. So promoting the competencies or clarifying the competencies that different stakeholders have in the society regarding the work of online media regarding hate speech and discrimination is an important matter, and we need to be coordinated about this. Why I'm mentioning discrimination and hate speech so frequently? Because we still have this problem. And working for
now we will need to wrap up, please. We will need to wrap.
Yeah, working for 5 years already, we realized that it's needed to address this issue too. And therefore, we started other initiatives with different stakeholders that are important for, making this a network of alive and to work in different directions with different stakeholders. So to wrap it up at this stage, and then I can continue with the discussion, I think it's very important to continue advocating for involvement of all relevant stakeholders in the process, which have their own competencies in regard to the professionalism of the media. But I would say media are the most important. And we do not need an over-regulation or state interference in the work of the professional media. I'm here for the discussion later, so thank you, Coloretto.
Thank you, Marina. It's a very positive example and a very interesting incentive to continue the growing of the self-regulation. It is an institution actually, and it's all the Balkan countries are in the first step. So this institution is important to grow and to become strong and solid. And for this, definitely we need the political will. So despite the work that we all do and the energies we put on self-regulation, without political will, it will be impossible to have this kind of solid foundation. Thank you very much. I'd like to go to Bosnia now, if I may say that. As a press council, the Bosnian and Herzegovina press council is one of the oldest in the region, and I believe it's also a success story to a certain extent. But I would like to know more from Amelia Odobasic, although she comes from Regulatory Communication Agency, and if she can bring up some information and shed some light on the situation there with regulation and self-regulation and the environment that the media is working.
Thank you, Coloretto. Can you all hear me well? I hope so, yes. Okay, thank you, Marina, for nodding your head. First of all, I really want to congratulate the organizer for such a wonderful conference and much needed discussion and debate that is so ongoing and it's so much needed in the region. So, Coloretto, yes, I come from the regulatory authority. I've been with the regulator for the last 20 years, and I've witnessed the establishment. I was part of the team that was establishing both regulatory authority. I was also to a certain extent involved, and I had knowledge of the establishment of the self-regulatory authority, such as Press Council. And really, when you talk about these things, it's very easy to start on a negative note. I would like to start on a positive note. When we look back 20 years ago, in the Western Balkans, the situation was completely different. Okay, we got caught up into our everyday jobs, both in regulatory authorities and self-regulatory authorities, that we somehow missed to see the achievements that were really done and the positive impact that was done. Was it challenging for both regulatory authorities and self-regulatory authorities? Yes, it was. Is it more challenging now in this converged online environment, in the digital era that we are all now living, and trying to find the most suitable models on how to respond to all these challenges? Yes, it is. Okay. I could join. Speaking of the challenges, I mean, I can just join to what my colleagues said before me. And I'm not really going to dwell on that. I would like to point out to a certain, let's talk about way forward on what we are going to do and what we are doing. First of all, I think it was really very brave to design a topic such as self-regulation versus regulation, okay? Because putting in one place self-regulation and regulation in any developing country is very brave, so to speak, because when we know that self-regulatory models have proved to be functioning efficiently in the societies where we have when there are highly developed democratic systems, etc., etc. So everything that is opposite of what we are facing in the Western Balkans. So we are doing our best really on how to adjust and how to go with the flow and how to try to do the best possible thing. Let me tell you now, convergence. I spoke about. I touched upon the idea of the convergence of the platform. So it's evident that in an online environment, when there is a possibility that in this online environment, this regulation, the traditional regulation as such, is diminishing, and that the regulatory authorities should come up with certain mechanisms on how to really bring it to the next level. At the Communications Regulatory Agencies of Bosnia and Herzegovina, what we did, we recognized, apart from the fact that we are a converged regulatory authority, so we have this really extra advantage because we are already have legal competencies for both electronic communications and electronic media or audiovisual media. But still, we've realized that the role of media literacy is crucial. So what we did in October 2019, a separate department was established only to deal with media literacy. Although it is a small team, but we've managed already to make a good network of over 50 other stakeholders, and we created this sort of like network of all relevant stakeholders that are dealing with media and information literacy, and we've achieved a lot already in such a short period. So we also bear in mind that media literacy is not a skill just to be obtained, but it's actually it needs to be constantly maintained. And that is an ever-changing process requiring constant reflections and adaptations. So another challenge that you see, every time you ask any kind of regulatory authority and you impose sort of like any topic of online media, we are going to say, well, sorry, we are not competent. Okay, so regulatory authorities are really facing a very challenging period. Why? Because traditionally speaking, we do have legal frameworks that are traditional, okay? On the other hand, what we have to do when it comes to, although we are not members of the EU, but still we are obliged to harmonize rules and regulations with the directives. And for example, and we are all now witnessing at the regulatory level that all regulatory authorities are now, by the new directive of audiovisual media, basically will have to step into this online platform, online sphere, and try to come up with a regulatory model that suits the best. So considering that on the level of the European Union, the regulatory authorities that are much more advanced than we are really seriously working on that. So we are basically following closely what is happening, not only in the area of video sharing platforms, but also all these other sort of like trying to find the niches on how we best accommodate our future competencies to respond and to regulate this online space, should we say. So we identified as a very important mechanism, that's the mechanism of co-regulation, and I will just give you one brief example, that we closely looked at the current law on communication, which is, as I said, considering that we are a converged regulatory authority, which is still sort of like in a way very vague and gives us a lot of space to move around and to basically explore this area of competencies that we haven't done before. For example, what we did in the meantime, we are working closely with the ministry on the new law on electronic media, and of course, I mean, the special chapters will be devoted to both co-regulation and video sharing platforms, because this is something that is our obligation according to the directive. So this may actually be a very interesting example, just to share experience, just to share on what we've done recently. Under the new management, we were really asked to look closely at the legal framework and to see whether we can somehow make a step forward and not really go into the internet, regulating internet, because we can't do that. But also in order to sort of like map, to carry on mapping of our licensees, of the licensees of Communications Regulatory Agency of Communications, and to ask them for the data on what are the web portals that they are distributing their content, as well as other platforms such as YouTube. We've received some very interesting information, but we also received the information basically that even our own licensees, that basically the content that is being distributed on the web, on their own web portal, that is being under their logo, okay, does not respond to the standards as they could. So we proposed the amendment of the current rule to basically oblige them more, even to in the areas when it comes to hate speech, protection of minors, terrorism, safety of citizens, etc., or right of reply, to basically to see whether they whether we could expand somehow our competencies in that particular area. So what is the outcome of the final outcome?
I will have to ask you to wrap it up.
I'm wrapping it up. The final outcome we will have after the end of public consultations, but what I'm just going to say in the conclusion is that the regulatory authorities should really look more closely into developing the models and mechanisms that they can do. For example, in enhancing the media literacy, media information literacy activities is something that, yes, we can do. Establishing closer cooperation with, let's say, press councils and other relevant associations is really something that we can do. So the regulatory authorities could be this driving force into creating and eventually implementing this new model of co-regulatory mechanisms. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Amelia. It's nice to see that you are working towards creating this new possible collaboration. It's very important. Regulation is important, but in Balkan countries, the only problem is that the politics usually interfere with too much. We see it in our country with regulatory bodies, so it's quite a challenge to be impartial and unbiased. So it's really a hard job to do. So thank you for the job you're doing. And I wanted to stress about what you said about the job you are trying to do with media literacy. That's a very interesting prospect for what regulatory bodies can do, because the best alternative, as we see it now, to fake news and disinformation is right there, the media literacy. So the more energies we put into that, the better it will be. So thank you. I would like now to quickly have some interventions from 3 of our colleagues here in Tirana. But I would like to keep it as short as you can, please. We have Claudiana, Alice, and Lorraine. I'm happy to introduce them because the 3 of them represent 3 very positive and I would say success stories in the field of self-regulation and producing unbiased information and fact-checking. And the 3 of them are also members of the Board of Complaints of the Alliance for Ethical Media in Albania. So we are practically working closely with them to treat the complaints we receive. The first one in line is Claudiana Capo from factoid.al, a very good fact-checking service, very useful to the public. Claudiana, the floor is yours. Please keep it as short as you can, like 3 to 4 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Colorado. I'm very happy to be part of this virtual. I want to share shortly something about what we are doing and why we think that the Albanian government, what it has happened about the anti-defamation package. So shortly, I am going to say something about it, about the situation in Albania, and why we think that it's very important to working with fact-checking and to discuss about it. We think that we all know that the anti-defamation package was a solution proposed by Prime Minister Edi Rama, aiming to end the public opinion concern regarding the disinformation and fake news shared in the digital media. That was a legal initiative of the government proposed by the parliament as a public opinion request. In other words, the Albanian citizen has requested the Audiovisual Media Authority to resolve this issue. But our question, it was, is there disinformation in social media? Yes, we know that there is, but is this was this a request by the citizens? When the parliament member in the Committee of Laws were asked about the number and type of complaints submitted in this institution, there was neither any reply or any transparency, that casting doubts on the argument claiming that the initiative was proposed by the citizen request and not by the Prime Minister. In these past years, politics framed by the media and journalists as undignified profession, as a government tool, at just anyone's service as a fake news generator. This pitiful professional exercised by individual was values, but also by those lacking them was categorized as unimportant, unprofessional, and unreliable. But that was not all. The press offices at public institutions were staffed with journalists, operators, and video editors. Do you know how many employers by our public institution press office are? I think quite a few, 5 to 20% to each institution. And what has happened? This institution structure produced ready-made video material, proceed messages, and organized press conference, completely excluded the independent journalists. The institution refused to provide any information. Despite the law on the right to information, the provided information is either lacking or has to be complained against in most cases, which take us 10 to 20 days. All we know about RTV, the channel on which the head of government published government messages and decisions. And this was a practice followed by the head of the opposition that in many times he shared video materials and often avoid press conference. The news created by the traditional media is rapidly shared on online media without undergoing any verification on their accuracy. A part of them created unethical content that included hate speech is degrading and even threatening. What is the Albanian government's proposal to stop the disinformation and fake news, the anti-defamation package, and do we think that this is the right solution? The Albanian government possesses several means to control digital media, including transparency regarding the founding of such portals. This is crucial filter, we believe, because on the matter of this media is the media survival. To journalists and constantly to the media that they work for, they have to buy the code of ethics that you say before, and this is very important because this is the reason and the most important that helps to self-regulate and develop free speech. This is the reason behind the existence of the AMA and also of the courts. We as Factoye believe that it's very important to write and to work with a code of ethic. And we believe that journalist principles are similar and quite simple if we are willing to implement them. If we truly believe in our profession, which should be based on free speech and on self-regulation process. Kola, I think I was shortly.
Thank you. You were. Thank you very much, Claudiana, for presenting quickly the challenges that you face and for speaking also about the initiative to, which we perceived as trying to silence the media and the critical media. That was the anti-defamation package, the so-called anti-defamation package. But we know that there are also other temptations to induce in the new penal code penalties towards journalists. So the war is not over. To protect the self-regulation. I would like to quickly go to. I would like to call it a successful initiative because we always think that adhering to the standards of ethics is difficult, and we believe sometimes that the Albanian media and maybe a lot of media in the Balkans are not able to meet the standards that we are taught at school of journalism and professionalism and ethics. But this example that Elise will explain quickly and shortly, if she can, is the very positive example that you can achieve all these standards internationally. Elise, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Coloretto. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. My cat has decided to show up and refuse to move, so I apologize in advance for that. So Exit, I work for Exit.al, and we've come a very long way since 2015, which is when we started as a simple blog site. Now, in the last 2 years, we've taken a number of steps to improve our standard of reporting, which, as you all know, is an ongoing process. It's something we have to keep working at. We did a lot of internal training, and we also put ourselves through an independence and ethics audit. Now, this was spearheaded by Reporters Without Borders, the Ethical Journalism Network, and UNESCO. And we were the first media in the Western Balkans to complete it and to publish all information relating to revenue, funding, ownership status, policies, editorial lines, and even political party affiliations online. We're now going through the process as a next step with Deloitte, who will give sort of a further assessment of this. Now, in terms of self-regulation, this process really enabled us to improve the way that we are accountable to ourselves. We've also made everything public, so we've given power to the public to hold us accountable as well. Now, the next step in this process of bettering ourselves was joining the Ethical Media Alliance. Now, by including a button on every page, on every article, whereby our readers can report anything, any issue or any violation, we are welcoming and actively inviting further criticism and oversight of our work. But we still have a very long way to go in Albania. But it's very positive that the Ethical Media Alliance has been formed and that Albanian platforms are showing willingness to be ethical. But there are still a lot of issues in Albania. We have the issue of media ownership. We've got powerful businessmen sort of wielding immense power in the media. We have big issues in the labour sector where contracts aren't enforced, salaries are low, and journalists are either actively or sort of indirectly censored by media owners. As for the anti-defamation package, I've made my thoughts on the matter quite clear many times. I believe it's a political tool designed purely to silence critical media. And I think that any form of it being introduced will have a chilling effect on media freedom. I believe in a hands-off regulatory approach. And I think the government should be looking to reduce the amount of laws around the media, such as decriminalizing defamation, not making more. Now, the last point I want to make very, very quickly is that public trust in media is at an all-time low, not just in Albania and the region, but globally. Now, this is a huge challenge because we could be the most ethically compliant media portal in the world, but if people don't understand what they're reading or know how to evaluate it, or if they look at us or you, for example, and consider it on the same level as fake news and disinformation, and they can't tell the difference, then that's a big problem. So we live in this world where the way that we're consuming news has changed, social media, YouTube, podcasts, online news. And I think we need to work to ensure that consumers have the tools they need to evaluate accurately the information they receive. As ethical media or people who are working hard towards it, we're just a voice of many in this huge sea of digital information. And I think there needs to be more focus on enhancing media literacy and giving consumers the information on how to differentiate between fake news and reality, because until we reach this equilibrium, I don't think self-regulation is something that's going to succeed on its own. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. It's congratulations again for being certified as an ethical international media. It's very curious to know that, I mean, one of the many standards of becoming ethical is open transparency about ownership and political affiliation and for funding. And I believe that's the Achilles heel for most of the media. I mean, that's why most of them would not pass the test, but you did. Thank you very much. Another good initiative this time is a citizens initiative, the Citizens Channel created by Lorenka Dio and friends. I would like to invite him and tell us quickly about the experience and what's what's the challenge of creating such initiatives for you? Loren, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Colorado. I will be very brief. I see we are a bit behind on time. So just a short introduction of the Citizens Channel and our work. First of all, I can proudly say that we amongst the youngest media in the Albanian landscape in terms of being established and managed by young professionals. So right now our team is working on three main directions. Like we have a digital newsroom focused on innovative and engaged reporting, an online capacity building platform that works especially with young journalists and the public on creating training related to media literacy, and also urban reporting in an informative platform that we have. What I would say is that for us, being a non-profit run by mission and not by business interests and clicks, like self-regulation might be easier because of obviously the pressure being lower and us not creating clickbait contents because we do not depend on clicks. But at the same time, I see it as a responsibility that we do not have in this condition to just think for ourselves. So what we have decided to do is to basically work on a manifesto of values that is embraced by all the newsroom, mostly dedicated first of all to transparency of our work and our financing, while we also push with our work for accountability for reporting of community issues, human rights violation, and promoting of diversity. Saying this, I'm very happy to point out what Coloretto and Besar mentioned earlier, that we had a fight against these media laws proposed from the Albanian government, and it's still going on. Like I see administrative bodies trying to control and decide what is fake, what is true, what is news, and what not, and also heavy fines that, for example, for us, if that draft law would have become a law, it would be very hard for us to continue existing if we got fined once or twice with that proposed law. So one of their strongest argument was lack of self-regulation, and I'm very happy to see that we're making first steps towards regulation. As Coloretto mentioned, the Alliance for Ethical Media is now working, like we do regular meetings, and I can say, I don't know if it's my personal opinion, but I see that there's lots of media who embraced this initiative. Like, of course, it's not perfect, it's young, but I see it as a way to take these small steps. And to wrap it up and to close it, I would like to thank everyone. And while the good side of this event is like in a time when we cannot meet and discuss with other people, it's good to see that we're not alone and that regionally this issue is being talked and discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorin. Thank you for being young and being a journalist, because it's, I mean, what I see now is that most young people, I mean, have this tendency to going towards PR or whatever, but not very fond of journalism. But seeing young journalists trying to create something together, it's a very good thing and hopeful. So thank you for what you told to us. I would like to share with you a poll. It is the last poll of this panel, this session. The poll is about the way we deal with comments online. It should be on your screens now. The problem with the comments online is, at least what we can see here in Albania, the problem is that it's a huge portion of the hate speech. Sometimes you don't have the journalists or the media producing the hate speech themselves in what they write in their articles, but they do it in another way. So they launch some information to provoke a certain population with hate speech. And I've noticed personally that there is an unfair moderation of comments in some media. So they let go the comments they don't like, but let in the comments that go in the direction of their policy or editorial board. So it's quite biased, I would say. And not talking about the comments on social media, on the pages of the media on social media, we have received quite a few complaints about comments. Now I have the poll results. So it seems that we have almost unanimously thought that they should be moderated. They should be moderated, but when we've reached, as I was saying about the complaints, when we reached to certain media about certain comments, most of them said that they didn't have the means to moderate them. So it's a good way to deal with this issue. But what if a media doesn't have the means to put a moderator and to moderate them? So that's something for self-regulation to go ahead and try to solve it and to put some standards in place. I'm sorry for taking so much time with my technical problems. The discussion went too long. I would like to quickly open the floor for debates. And because I don't have I have the chat disabled, I don't know what's happening with my computer here. I would like Ola or somebody else to help me, because I cannot see the chat and who's making questions and who would like to speak. So if you can help me with the discussion from the participants in this room. Whoever has something to say or to ask to discuss about what was said, or to ask to the panelists that spoke, is free to do it now. We have 14 minutes now. So do we have somebody who wants to make a question or add something or disagree with anything or show another success story that was not included in this panel? We'll be happy to hear. As I said, I cannot see the chat because of my technical problem, so probably a lot is happening there, but I cannot see what's happening there. So anything? Anybody? Are we all clear? I mean, So I
Two people have their hands up, Coloretto. I can see.
thank you, Alice. Thank you, thank you.
Marina
Maybe
and
you can
Al.
take you can help me with the moderation of the.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Okay, I can see two people with their hands up. I hope they didn't press them by accident. Marina, did you have a question you wanted to ask? Coloretto, can you unmute Marina, please? I'm unable to.
Yes, thank you. My comment is related to the moderation of comments on social media. We have this provision in the guidelines for ethical reporting in the online media that we recently developed, and we think that the media themselves are the ones that are most relevant on to address this issue. They are the ones to deal with this problem. They often report to us that they do not have sufficient staff and they do not have time to work on this, especially when things like hate speech or disinformation are shared in the comments. Yeah, it's one of the ways is to always close this option for comments on social media. But on the other hand, in a more substantial way, we think that the media can address this problem by deconstructing hate speech, discrimination, or disinformation that happens there. They do not have to regularly delete comments in every second, when they happen, because this is practically impossible. But what they can do as professional media is to address it in this way, to help the public be aware about those negative tendencies that happen. And we have such examples. We have media which do it already, when they are not just by compiling information on social media, but also when they realize that there are some other platforms that spread disinformation, or when fake news happens. And sometimes we even have problems when media that are considered credible, just it happens to have some disinformation, intentionally or not. And we think that the media themselves should address it in this problem. They can react on this. They can just help to deconstruct these problems. I think their role is important, and that's why we have this provision in the online media guidelines too. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Somebody else raising their hand?
Sorry, I wanted to talk about the online moderation of comments as well. It was really interesting. I think it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I came across a number of sites, a number of comments on an Exit article that was published in Albanian. And I believe it was an article about the mayor of Tirana, Arian Valia, and it was a critical article. And there were all these comments from these accounts that were sort of speaking out in favor of him and saying how what we were reporting was fake news. So I started looking at these pages, and they were actually pages, not profiles. And they'd all been set up around the same time, which was about a month or so prior, literally on the same day. And I did a Google image search of the photos that had been used, and they were people from America and sort of semi-famous people. And it was really interesting that these profiles, these pages, by the way, you can have one Facebook profile and a completely unlimited number of pages. These pages had been set up, and I started tracking them around sort of Albanian internet, and they were appearing and trolling people and writing not very pleasant things, but also speaking out in support of the government. And it appeared to be some coordinated sort of attack. Now, I don't agree with necessarily censoring or removing those comments. I have my own, sorry, I'm going on a bit, but I have my own page, a blog page, and I will delete comments if they are, could be considered as illegal, if they are homophobic, sexist, racist, are inciting hate, and are using sort of foul language against someone. Other than that, I think people should be allowed to comment what they want. That's all I wanted to say. We had Al Rakai, he had his hand up next. Al, can somebody unmute him, please?
Hello, thanks, Alice. I find it interesting that we're discussing about censorship of comments when we don't allow them even here. But besides that, I wanted to ask, since we have a lot of media professionals, if what is the status of cooperation among media organizations and journalists themselves? Because we often speak of pressure from businesses, from politics, and so on. But is there enough being done for media to sort of create a common ground against these pressures? Thank you.
Well, I don't know who should answer to that. I mean, anybody want? I mean, from the panelists want to answer to that?
Can I? Oh, sorry.
Yes, please go.
I think there is an issue with a lack of solidarity between a lot of journalists in Albania and a lot of organizations. I don't think we are working together in the best way possible. I think I know we had problems with the Media Alliance. There were, oh, I don't want to work with that person, or I don't want to be associated with them. Or I think we need to recognize that we may have different beliefs and different ideas and support different things, but we do need to work together. There's this element of people thinking they're competing against each other because we're working for competing platforms. While our platforms may be competing, we are still journalists and we are all fighting the same battle and suffering from the same issues and challenges. So I think there does need to be more solidarity. But you know what? I mean, I've only been in Albania for 3 years. I think things might be improving slightly, but I might be wrong.
Edis, thank you. If I may add something, I'm quite jealous about Macedonia, North Macedonia and Kosovo for having quite a strong membership. While we in Albania, we managed to bring together 16 media. Now they up to 23. But as Alice mentioned, during the meeting that we were founding the Alliance for Ethical Media, we had a lot of problems with people who didn't want to be in a room. So journalists who didn't want to be in the same room with some other journalists. So some media hating other media and stuff like that. So it was more diplomacy that, I mean, we had to exert a lot of diplomacy to try to bring people together. It might have to do with our not so recent past. I don't know that, but I see that in North Macedonia, is it true, Marina, that you have, I don't know, 200 members or something? If somebody can unmute Marina for a bit.
Yeah, actually, we have, as I mentioned before, 140 almost members of the Register of Professional Media, while in the Press Council as such, we have more than 200 as members now.
So that's quite good.
230 roughly, and
10 times more than we have.
There's an interest to join the Press Council, but it's an issue when they breach the criteria, then they can no longer be part of this family of self-regulation.
Right. So I don't know why is that reason for in Albania, because I know in Serbia also there is a strong community and people have gathered. In Bosnia is the same. So many media are being member of the press councils, but here is very, and I must say that there were 2 previous attempts in Albania to set up a press council. One was like 15 years ago, the other like 8 years ago, and the one that we created, me and our colleagues, was a 3rd attempt 3 years ago. So something is telling me that it's difficult to bring journalists back together here. So another question? We still have 4 minutes.
Yes, I see a young lady here with her hand up. It says Press and Online. I'm sorry, I can't see your name, but if somebody could kindly unmute her, please. Press and Online, there we go.
Yeah, it's a full name, Press and Online Media Council in BH. We have extended officially our names. So now we are, from the beginning of this year, also Online Media Council in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you for seeing a lot of familiar faces. It was a great discussion. I would like just to add, when it comes to online media comments, unfortunately, we have a lot of experience when it comes to moderation of comments in online space. We started receiving complaints on hate speech and comments maybe at the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, so almost 10 years. And it was a long, long way. And today we can say that we built a strong connection and strong communication with editors-in-chief in dealing such complaints. We worked a lot, had a lot of different kind of campaigns, a lot of communication. Unfortunately, we had to report to our prosecution office some examples of drastic breach of not only press code but our criminal code. There were some almost physical attacks explained in comments, but luckily today we built a great way of solving all inappropriate content found in comments. So we set a few rules that we followed from European practice. So in case when any form of inappropriate comments occur on portal, editor-in-chief is not he's not responsible for that content, but in case he's being warned and not acting upon complaints or reaction of the complaints of the press council, because sometimes we also monitor comments and warn editors there's some inappropriate content, then he becomes responsible. And of course, press council had to report in cooperation with editors-in-chief people who are misusing their opportunity to express their opinion. So it's very important to keep that space for communication, but for constructive communication without any law misusing. And also, it's very interesting to hear from editors-in-chief that they use sometimes comment sections to find some new information on topics being in that article covered. And also when it comes to membership, unfortunately, we were stick to some small number, and I would like to congratulate Marina for such expansion and good work in past years. We decided to open a press council for more members, because we had that strict set of rules for media only being registered as a limited company, and now we changed those rules. So more media who are, for example, working as a civil society association, they would also be able to become a part of the press council. So that would be it because of the time. Thank you.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we have reached the end, but thank you. It was. I mean, it's very good that we had somebody from the Press Council of Bosnia and Herzegovina here, one of the oldest in the region, and to my personal opinion, working very well and doing a great job there. So I think we don't have any more time for questions. Sorry if there is any raised hand, which I cannot see. I would like to apologize for my technical problems. And just a wrap up of the panel, I think we try to tackle here different angles for self-regulation versus regulation. We spoke also for co-regulation. So we heard about this very interesting European initiative, the European Digital Media Observatory, which is very interesting because it's a multidisciplinary way to respond to disinformation. So to try to understand how it works, how it is distributed. So to me, it's an academic work that will help a lot to shape future policies about that. We heard also about the business and why the business should consider self-regulation very important to create a better democracy, a better working of the media, and a better working for the businesses. We also heard from Besar that there are ways to create an internal self-regulation for a media. So we don't always need to run and search for external mechanism. We can build, if we can, and we are big enough, we can build them inside our media organizations. We did 2 polls. We also have a very important intervention from Kosovo, from Ms. Violeta Husseini from the Independent Media Commission, and also from the Regulatory Communication Agency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Very important to see the other side, how the regulation can work towards a co-regulation, and in what ways we can use their energies into the same common goal of creating a more free and responsible media landscape. The experience of North Macedonia was brought here by Marina Tuneva, 140 members of the, how you call it, the long list of media that wants to cooperate with the business chamber, but also over 200 members in the Media Council. We also heard the experiences of young journalists and fact-checking journalists here in Tirana. I think we said it all what we could for this, and I would like to thank you all for being here. Enjoy the rest of the panels and discussions. Thank you very much.